investigation needed with what Abbott has done, and also the Food and Drug Administration, and why it took them so long to make this information available. So now, where are we now? There is a shortage, and we have to address that. I'm doing that in several ways. I first, I want to really give a shout out to a reporter, Helena Bottmiller-Evick, who started writing the stories about this very early, months ago. In March, I've been at this since March, where I called for an office of the Inspector General to do an investigation of what was going on. And I did this before I had a copy of the whistleblower's report. So I immediately, because what happened is that at least 2 infants died, several more hospitalized. So I responded to that immediately, and then had the whistleblower's report, and then made that public. So again, where are we now, which is what you want to know about what we're going to try to do. And let me let you know about actions that I have taken. I've mentioned the Inspector General's report, investigation that we're moving on. We have 2 hearings in place. One is this week on Thursday with the director of the Food and Drug Administration, Dr. Califf, and I will address this issue there. The next is on the 25th of May, and that will be with leading experts in this field. And on Friday, we offered and invited Abbott to come to a hearing. I have not heard back from them yet. And I hope I do. I hope they will come so that we can ask the questions that need to be asked about what they did do and what they did not do. In addition to that, I will be in the next couple of days putting out urgent legislation to address the funding needs for the shortage and how we can move quickly to get product on the shelves for families. And then the last piece is we'll introduce legislation this week, which will call for requirements and new authorities for the Food and Drug Administration. It is a serious issue. And let me just say one other piece, which is about the industry and infant formula. There has been a consolidation of that industry so that there are few suppliers, so that when you have the scope of the problem that you had with Abbott and the massive recall, that there's nothing in its place, and there was no plan for anything to be in place. So that is an additional problem that we have. We have 4 companies, only 4 companies, that have 95% of the market, and Abbott makes up 43%. This consolidation has helped to create this problem. So the actions are coming about, moving as quickly as we can. But I just want to say, parents should not have to choose between the supply of the product and food safety. That is unconscionable. And you think about, you have a newborn, you go out and you purchase formula, and you want to feed your baby. And now what you will find is that the product is not available. And in addition to that, that it could be harmful and so dangerous to your child. What are we doing? And this is the opportunity. The federal government needs to step in and do something about this, and do something about it immediately, which is what I've been trying to do. And I'm looking at a company that has put profit over people, and it's plain wrong. The company was aware of the failure, and they attempted to hide that information from the Food and Drug Administration, and the Food and Drug Administration just dragged their feet in making this public. And with regard to the product, This needs to be right, and it's not just being right to get outside the door. That is about their profit motive here. Let me now turn it over for questions.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We'll start with a question from Lorraine Connolly. Lorraine asks, will FDA allow European formulas to be sold in the US?
Well, Lorraine, it's a very good question. And that is what my intent is to be able to move quickly with an emergency appropriation, if I can, so that we can allow those facilities that are FDA approved. I am not for opening the door to whether they are international or domestic without FDA approval. It's the standard that we have. I don't know what could be coming in, but I want to facilitate the process of product coming in from overseas that we can get on the shelves immediately, but from an FDA approved facility.
Thank you, Lorraine. We'll now go over to Caitlin with CBS. Caitlin, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Caitlin?
Hi, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm a reporter, but I'm also a mom of an 8-month-old who I've been going through this myself, having fed my son Similac. And so, this is something that I think many parents are wondering, first of all, how this happens in the United States of America, where you have such a consolidation of the market that one thing like this sends us into this spiral. And then the other question I had was, we're in May. I know I've been personally dealing with this for months. I know many other parents have been dealing with this for several months. Why does it feel like it's taken up till now for Congress to take action? I know you mentioned that you've been working on this, but Congress as a whole. And then I'm also wondering, what is the specific culpability of the FDA here? What are they held accountable for? And thank you.
These are good questions. And first of all, I'm so concerned about you and your 8-month-old. That's underlying this whole issue. It's about our babies, and making sure that they're safe. So the consolidation is a big part of the problem. And yes, admittedly, we had supply chain issues because of a pandemic. I'm not going to minimize that as well. That is a piece of that. However, when we had the information, which was last October, and subsequently I have found that there has been another report that when the FDA went into the plant in September, they reported suspicions of a potential contamination. So let's just say September, a whistleblower's report in October, no intervention in dealing with the whistleblower until December. And then they again went into the plant on January 31st and they found contamination, and then a recall in February. I'm with you. That's why I've had the Inspector General, but that takes a while, and I understand that. I want to investigate how this happened. What was the role of every actor? The FDA, the Abbott Nutrition, and I want to hold the bad actors, whomever they are, accountable for this. At least 2 babies died, several more hospitalized. People have got to be accountable. And I don't have all the information from the investigation, but that's where I'm going, Kate.
Thank you. We'll now turn over to Jennifer Joas. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Jennifer asks, so are there any FDA-approved facilities outside of the U.S.?
Yes, there are. We have 7 facilities in Europe and 2 in Mexico. And I am told there are 12 in the United States, but that industry is consolidated to the 4 biggest ones that there are. So they are, and we are working to try to see how quickly we might be able to get that product here. Again, I want to repeat, we need to get a product from an FDA-approved facility. That is our standard. I have issues with the FDA, but we do have a standard. I do not want to see a product coming in from a facility that has not been inspected, that we don't know very, very much about, and we do not know the quality of their product. I will also say to you that Europe has much stronger food safety standards than the United States. So if they're FDA approved in Europe, there's a certain level of confidence that we have that the product is a quality product.
Thank you. We have a follow-up from Christine on that front, who asks, what about Canada?
I honestly, at the moment, I don't know if Canada has a facility, but I'll try to check that immediately and then find out about their, whether or not it's FDA approved, et cetera. But I'll check on that, and hopefully before this call is over, I can provide you with some information, okay?
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have another question from Julie Banks of CT News Junkie, who asks, are people going through platforms like Amazon to purchase formula overseas?
I think, I met a gentleman yesterday. This is very, very interesting. His wife is about to give birth, and he was hearing me speak about this, and he said to me that she is understanding the nature of the problem. She has been looking into where she can get supply, and she was looking at Australia. So yes is the answer to your question. I think people are trying to examine whatever a platform they can to be able to get what they need to feed their babies.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
What we have to look at, by the way, is price gouging. When and that is something else to look into, as to, because there's short supply, and we know what happens. You just take a look at the oil industry, and the price gouging that's going on there, and even in the meatpacking industry. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the price issue with the FTC.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I see that Jennifer Joas has her hand raised. Jennifer, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, so I'm from NBC, by the way, and I know that you said, it was unconscionable that parents are having to choose between giving their kids a contaminated product, and not having formula for their kids. But I spoke with a doctor actually last week with, I believe it was Yukon Health. And basically she said that some of these formulas that Abbott makes are so specialized for different needs that these babies have, that there's like nothing else available on the market. And at specific times, she unfortunately would still recommend that parents take that risk and give their kids this formula knowing it's contaminated because there's nothing else available. So I guess I just want your reaction to that. And
my reaction to that is, look, parents are desperate. Okay, that is what I mean. That is really the case. But the point is, she is checking. You talk to a doctor. She is checking with a physician, and I know that the FDA has said to Abbott that on a case-by-case basis, and again with. Dealing with a physician or a medical opinion, that because it is so specialized, that they would allow the usage of it. But think about that. Think about that. Imagine the parent saying, I have to have it. It's a specialized product. My doctor says, go for it, try it, etc. But you take, don't you think, I'm asking you, don't you think that a parent at some level says, I may be taking a chance with my baby? And why should parents be in this situation? I'm also considering that in the legislation, making sure that we include it as well. So, yeah, know all about it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Let's head over to Julia LeBlanc with Fox 61. Julia, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Congresswoman, for offering this availability. I just had a question. To your knowledge, what's the latest on that investigation? Because it says, on the CDC website that on May 12th, 2022, the CDC announced that the investigation is closed. So are you saying somebody else also needs to look into this? And what's the latest in terms of Abbott being investigated?
That is not the OIG investigation. That's the Officer of the Inspector General. The Inspector General, I asked on March 3rd, I think, for an Inspector General's report. So that is just beginning to get underway. And it takes a while to do that, which is why I have tried to move in several other directions as well. And so that we have, while pending that, we are trying to look at legislation and potential emergency legislation on importing and dealing with the hearings where we can get at some of this this information, so that we are speaking with the OIG today on their initial report. So I may have some further information about that. Can I take a moment to get back to Canada? The facilities, there are 21 infant formula facilities that produce infant formula products for the US market. Canada is for the 12, I said, based in the US, 2 in Mexico, and 7 in the EU. So that's where they are located. They're not located in Canada.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have a follow-up from Lorraine Connolly. Lorraine asks, will there be bipartisan support for emergency legislation?
I hope so, and quite honestly, I'm encouraged by that. We have been in conversation. I've been in my office has been in conversation with our Republican counterparts in the House, and they seem interested in doing that. And it should be a bipartisan issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. It shouldn't even, we shouldn't have to ask that question, but we do.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have a question from JD Allen at WSHU. JD asks, how can the country ramp up domestic production of baby formula? How likely is a defense production authorization?
Good question. Very, very good question. I initially wanted to go down that route, and I was told that we couldn't. However, subsequently, we have found out that there may be an opportunity for us to use the Defense Production Act by amending it in some way. So we are examining if we can amend the Defense Production Act to allow for the production of more formula. The current status of this, so that you know, is with Legislative Council, and we are in touch with them. As a matter of fact, my staff has a conversation with them today to go over different options for language and the feasibility of this in our legislation.
Do we have any more questions for the...
By the way, just so that manufacturers are already upping their production here. They're on 24/7 here to do what needs to get done and so forth. But we are exploring, we just need more lines, and that's why we're exploring the Defense Production Act.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up to that. Do you know what exactly, because Speaker Pelosi said the same thing, that the Defense Production Act couldn't be used. Is there a reason why? Or what specifically would have to be amended?
Well, in order to allow for this particular instance, yeah. And I had spoken to the speaker, and we both talked about the Defense Production Act, and we wanted to, that was our, as I said, was my first. That's where I went. Say, why can't we just up this? And then again, as I said, because we had to check the legalities of it, and they had said that we couldn't use it for this, but the fact now is that we do have an opportunity to be able to use it, and with an amendment process, and that's what we're about to. It's the way it's written. You need to look at it for U.S. domestic supply chains. You need to mention infant formula supply chain. Apparently, that's the rub. But I told you, my staff is sitting down with them today to sort this through and talk about what the language should be.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We have one last question from Jennifer Joas. She asks, so are all the rest of the U.S. producers maxed out? I know the CEO of formula maker Perrigo told Reuters he predicts this shortage could last the rest of the year. He said 2 Perrigo plants are running at 115% capacity.
I'm going to disagree with his final statement about toward the end of the year, because I find that unacceptable. But I think he's right about what they're doing in terms of producing at 150% of capacity, which is why we need to explore the importation of formula from overseas, from Europe, and we need to have the new authorities to be able to do that. So, and that's what we are looking at. But in fact, the domestic producers are going above and beyond.
Do we have any final questions for the Congresswoman? All right, Congresswoman, I'll turn it over to you to close.
Well, look, if you do have any further questions, please be in touch with King. He'll get you his information so that we can do this, and happy to try to answer any questions that you have. I've spent a lot of time in my career in the House of Representatives focused on food safety. And I'm going to focus on this in a way that looks at an investigation of Abbott Nutrition and what they have done. And to get to the bottom of that, and as I say, my view is that people need to be held accountable, but we need an investigation for that. Similarly, with the Food and Drug Administration, we have to know why this happened so that it does not happen again. FDA is a regulatory agency. That is their job. We do not produce at the federal level infant formula. We have manufacturers who do. They need to have a strict set of standards that they need to comply with, and at the least notion that something has been violated, they need to be brought to task. I also understand the nature of the problem now. How do we increase supply now? How do we get product back on the shelves now? And I'm working to try to do that. We need to increase supply, but we need to be sure that it is safe for our babies. And Abbott is in the business of stock buybacks rather than in this crisis. That has to be turned around. There should be no dark night of the soul, if you will, for parents having to make a decision about purchasing a product that can hurt their child, or that they can't find the product at all. That's unconscionable. Thank you. Thank you all for joining this morning. And please feel free to be in touch if you need any more information.
Recording.